Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
Welcome back to Too Much. As I'm sure many people are aware, it's been in the news a lot. We're going to have a little bit of a trigger warning before we begin today because we will be discussing the Epstein files. And it's taken me a minute to wrap my head around what's been happening. I don't even really fully believe I've wrapped my head around it. But that is why we are doing the episode now, because I wanted to process. And to be honest, I've been incredibly overwhelmed by the Epstein files in a way that sort of surprises me because I believe I'm very keenly aware of patriarchy and misogyny and how those systems work. But what has transpired is beyond my brain's comprehension. It involves an imagination that mine is not even capable of. It's not even remotely close to where my brain can go. It's beyond the moral universe I thought we lived in. And we assume that everyone lives in a similar moral universe. And so the shock of this is realizing that we do not. And now we have to figure out how to embrace a larger immoral universe than we thought existed. And so I've been facing these files bit by bit because it's all as much as my nervous system can take at a time. And ingesting more feels destabilizing. So do not feel bad if you are not facing them head on. You do not have the capacity. There are plenty of thought leaders, researchers, lawyers, therapists who are delving into this information on the collective's behalf. And for example, on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast, Amanda Doyle does 2 informative episodes. One is a chronological account of the whole Epstein saga, so to contextualize the time frame of when this started, how it evolved. The first one was helpful because it helps synthesize information and the scale of the operation, which a lot of us don't have the depth. We sort of know what's happened over the past 10 years, but this has been building for a very long time. And the second one, she did an interview with Brad Edwards, who has tirelessly represented 200 of Epstein's victims pro bono. And he explains the more minute offenses and the layers and layers of depravity that existed. And I would feel remiss not to address this topic, but we're not going to go into the details of the files, rather what they mean. And so I brought in my dear friend and PhD in critical race theory and women's studies, Dr. Nicole Haggard, to help us understand what is happening, why it's so destabilizing, and how we can understand it as a culture so something like this can never happen again. Nicole, Dr. Nicole, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Let me tell you about Dr. Nicole. I love
Hi.
that she's a doctor. Dr. Nicole Haggard is an award-winning cultural strategist, professor, and published researcher. For more than 20 years, her scholarship has examined the intersection of race, gender, and media in American culture, equipping institutions with research-driven frameworks to recognize harmful narrative patterns and reimagine representation in ways that foster the advancement of women and girls. She's the co-founder of the Center for Intersectional Media and Entertainment, an organization dedicated to unpacking why entertainment media matters and advancing representation across industries. Through CME, Dr. Nicole has served as a cultural strategist for organizations, including the Gina Davis Institute, Lydia Hill Philanthropies, If That Initiative, the National Women's History Museum, the Representation Project, and Color of Change, supporting their efforts to advance women in underrepresented fields and promote gender equity at scale. As a public academic, Dr. Nicole most recently served as director of the Center of the Advancement for Women, and her consulting career has been devoted to promoting gender parity and structural change. She's contributed more than a dozen edited collections and white papers, including the report on the status of women and girls in California. Her expertise has been featured by NPR, Spectrum, The Wrap, Variety, Glamour, and NBC. In 2024, she was named one of MSN's 15 visionary educators inspiring knowledge and growth. Dr. Nicole holds a PhD in American Studies from St. Louis University and a BA from the University of Southern California.
Hello.
Thank you for being here and being willing to have a complicated conversation.
I've been so desperate to have this conversation, so I'm so grateful to you to have it because your brain is one of my faves.
I know we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun synthesizing information and data together.
The best.
So how are you doing? Let's just start there.
I, like many people, I'm not okay, and I'm okay at the same time. I think when the files got released and it was just this onslaught of seeing it, and as a survivor of childhood abuse myself, it's just like, I don't want to think about it. Why are you bringing it up? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. It's the layers on layers on layers. And the layer of how do we not see this? What do we do about it? Why does it feel like nobody in power cares? And why am I constantly thinking about this now? There's just so much.
Mhm.
For me, it's the why don't we see it?
Well, I think what's particularly hard, especially for women that have known about the depth of inequity in the culture that we live in, it just makes you realize, oh, we've been fighting all these things, but we really didn't really understand how these power structures were operating in a way that essentially the memo that we are receiving is that women do not matter, right? You are not believed, and there's a reason you're not believed. It's because we don't treat you as human. And I was at dinner the other night talking about this with my friend, and these two women next to us chimed in and they were like, can we talk about this with you? And I
Wow.
was like, oh yeah, people are starving to have this conversation in a way that feels safe. But at the same time, I also think there's a generational difference. I definitely feel like
Hmm.
when I talk to older generations about this, they don't I don't know if they're feeling it in the way that maybe you and I are feeling it. I feel so deeply upset on so many levels, not only for like what it means for us to understand how this is all working or how this has worked, but also for like the young women coming up in the world. And we
Yeah.
have to explain to them, they're hearing about it in the news. And what do you say to a young girl, 8 to 14, whose brain can't even wrap their head around something this horrific?
Yeah.
Because I can barely wrap my head around
Right.
something this horrific.
I think that's something you said really triggered something for me. It's like the base, the depravity of it all. Like I didn't realize it was that low, right?
Yeah,
Like
same.
I knew we had issues around gender and inequality and sexualization and objectification and all of these, like I've been writing this data for years. I I am so sad that this is the culture I live in,
Mhm.
right? And furious that it's this low, that little girls are being abused in this way. And we've known, right? I mean, and that's the thing. Like we've known that girls get abused. 1 out of 4 women. And that's only who reports, right? So we know that this activity is going on, but this concerted effort to abuse women without thought of what that will do to them in their future life and our culture as a whole. And as this like huge targeted project that's happening, I think that aspect of it, it's not just these individual people, but it's this concerted effort and to keep it quiet too.
Yeah. And just to give context, I was talking to a friend about this, and she has daughters around, 12 years old, around the age that Epstein was trafficking young women. And those are the women he was targeting and manipulating. And she was trying to explain to her girls sort of the depth of manipulation and,
Yeah.
how they said things like this can happen. And her daughters were like, well, what do you mean? Like, how does that happen? Like,
Hmm.
you just wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, my daughters don't even understand how manipulation works because
Yeah.
they're so innocent and naive. They don't even understand someone could say, I'm going to kill your parents unless you do this.
Yeah.
Because she was like, and like how beautiful, because that's what 12-year-olds should
Yeah.
be, right? But then you sit there and you're like, that's who he was targeting. Those are the minds that he was targeting.
Mhm.
Kids that don't even believe or understand what manipulation or how it works or
Yeah.
have the intellect to move against it, because why would they? They're 12 and they're
Right.
children. And so just like I really want to contextualize that because we're talking
Mhm.
about really young kids and minds that are not fully formed in a
Yeah.
way that you can't expect them to even understand what's happening, because who would understand manipulation at that age?
Yeah. So the age thing is really fascinating and the development and the age thing. So for me, I was like 5 and 6 when I was abused by a family member, and then in middle school by a teacher, and then when I was like 17 by someone else who was close to the family. So those ages matter, right? And it was when, do you remember when that Michael Jackson documentary came out? But
Yes.
Oprah did that whole thing about grooming. And it wasn't until I watched that I really understood the manipulation, right? And how grooming works, and that I had a name for it. And I think maybe that's the benefit of a lot of this stuff, is that we're able to put names to behaviors and delineate what's right and wrong, or, hopefully somehow we'll get out of that. But the grooming, the manipulation, that is the piece of it, that when you're able to identify that it is a man doing that, it's not a girl being abused or a young boy being abused, it is a person, most likely a white male, doing this grooming, right? And that is a behavior that's unacceptable, right? And so we call out.
And they obviously knew what they were doing. There was a very sophisticated system
Yeah.
behind what they were doing. And so in the Epstein files, there are so many people named, but unsurprisingly, we have a lot of Hollywood people named.
Mm-hmm.
You and I know this very well. We have entertainment backgrounds. And can you share with us about the hidden underbelly of sex abuse in Hollywood, in Hollywood's history, and how entertainment has very much supported this narrative? They've never depicted going for young women as inappropriate. So can you talk to us about that from your understanding as a PhD in the subject?
Well, I'm finding myself so blah, 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 because there's so many layers, right? And I think that's why this for us is the layers on layers on layers of ways of the entry points of where you could talk about it, right? So we could talk about it from a business standpoint. Like, what did it serve to have women be sexually abused on set? We could talk about it from a what is the impact of that on society standpoint. Selma Hayek put out this brilliant essay called Harvey Weinstein is My Monster Too. And she talks about the connection between the underbelly of Hollywood and being this place that sexual abuse runs rampant, and then the impact that has on what shows up on screen, and the lack of women filmmakers, and the data around that, and how does that impact what we all are consuming. And then we have the piece of what are we consuming? Why aren't we appalled at how many girls are naked on screen, right? Why aren't we appalled at the Lolitas of it all? Why doesn't that appall us? Why doesn't that horrify us? Why are we so accepting of the gaze of looking at little girls and sexualizing them and being okay with it? So I think there's so many, I think those are, for me, the three primary lanes that we could analyze this through. So where you want to go, girl?
Why does it benefit the business? Let's start there. Why is it a business incentive to do this?
Because they pay them less, ultimately,
Yeah.
right? So if you're coming into a position of shame, you're going to demand less. And to me, I think that's the one-to-one connection too. It's about power and control over the women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, especially in the early days of the studio system, when you had these contracts, a lot of them were sort of like indentured servitude, where you're signed to a multi-picture deal and they're working you and working you and working you. What's better than a young girl who doesn't know better that you can exploit across 50 films a year for pennies on the dollar?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the big thing about how does sexual abuse on screen relate to the people who are making the content, right? And so why does it matter that you have someone like Harvey Weinstein making so many movies that we love, right? Salma Hayek talks about the fact that when they were making the Frida movie, right? And Frida is like a feminist icon, and that he wanted to get away with her eyebrow because it wasn't sexy to him, that he wanted to hype up the lesbian sex scenes, that he didn't want Frida to walk with a limp when we know about her horrific accidents that she had. All of these ways in which you are taking a story that is rooted in a historical woman's story, and then you are hypersexualizing all of it. Now, everybody who's consuming this story has been impacted by that. And that's the way that the misogyny, that's the way that the hypersexualization, the objectification, that this is what women are good for, gets seeped into it, because it's about the people who are making it as well. And that's part of what matters of why women don't have equality in the film industry, too.
Yeah. And also, I just want to clarify that when you're working in these industries, very toxic behavior is normalized. And so when you're questioning that behavior, you are pushed out of the system. A lot of people look the other way because that's just how it is, number one. And number two, because their livelihoods depend on it. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of people are like, well, how can so many people get complicit in things like this? And we live in a very capitalistic world where unfortunately a lot of people are not in positions where they can just walk away from a job due to values misalignment. I think we're in a world right now where we're experiencing a lot of complexity in that regard. And so we have to do the best we can with the tools we have. And I don't necessarily like, it's hard to say because I don't like judge the complicity necessarily. It's just
Mhm.
one of those things that I'm like, we have to start looking at how to build differently and look at
Yeah.
these systems differently. For example, the America's Next Top Model documentary. A
Right.
lot of people are like, well, they're not accountable enough. No one's accountable enough in that documentary. And I'm like, well, you have to also understand like these people spent 20 years making a show. It's not an excuse by any means. You should know
Mhm.
that's inappropriate and what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
But there is probably a personal fear that if I leave this 20-year-old hit show, I don't have a career and what is my life going to look like? I don't know if that's like right or wrong because
Yeah.
I obviously would have vibrated out. But for those people, I'm like, we have to look at how these systems proliferate once you're inside them.
Okay.
And just because they were not necessarily wielding the harm in the same way that some other people in that show were wielding harm, they were still a participant
Yeah.
in the harm, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
Well, the complicity, I think to me, it's like, so what now what? Like you said as well, we have to do better now. And so we
Mhm.
can spend all day sitting there being like, was it okay? Did he really rape her? Did this happen? Did this happen? Why did she say? Why would you take a job? Why'd you give him a blowjob in the back? Like, okay, is that what's important? Or is the impact on what this has had on our society and how we're going to move forward important?
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's why too, the Hollywood business, there's like layers on layers on layers there. For me, the work is in how do we as individuals reconstruct our own point of view so that when we see this material, when we see those kinds of stories appear, they're no longer pleasing to us,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do we learn to talk back to the screen so that when we see that shit that they're feeding us, which on one hand is serving to objectify women and create this visual pleasure narrative that's going on where like you're deriving pleasure from watching women's bodies, and on the other hand is relating that has a one-to-one relationship to how you treat women in society, right? So it's a full circle in the world I live in. Like media
Yeah.
impacts society and it impacts the way that you live your life. So if you are unconsciously consuming, then of course it's going to impact the way that you interact with women and girls. It's going to impact how you're interacting with the Epstein files. It's going to impact how you dealt with the R. Kelly girls, right? Because it becomes about the girls because you've been so trained to view them as the perpetrators of egging men on with their sexy little bodies,
Yeah.
right? So to
Well, at
me,
this
that's
point,
fascinating.
the amount of people being exposed from R. Kelly to Diddy to everyone that named the Epstein files, you sit there and you're like, this is a patriarchy problem. Like this
Yeah.
is the big thing where it's like, yes, there's a few women implicated in these things, but I'm like, this is a male problem. This is a patriarchy problem. These
Mhm.
are men who are wielding harm among women, and the amount of people even that just knew about what was going on with Cassie in that industry
Yeah.
and looked the other way, they knew she was being abused. And you sit there and you're like, well, what about this system? That's the part that's heartbreaking for me is like all these men knew and they didn't do anything.
Yeah. So how do we create a culture in which we have pathways to do something? Like what does that look like? And that I think that for me is the place where I can get hope in it,
Mhm.
right? The way that we have witnessed patriarchy showing its ass, right? I mean, that's what this is. Like we have witnessed this. It is unfathomable. I mean, like I have no word, and you know me, I'm never at a loss for words. I have no words for like how disgusting this is, and this is peak patriarchy, right? Peak
Well,
patriarchy, and
it's
so.
it's
Yeah.
hard to formulate the language or process your thoughts because I'm with you. I always have something to say about the harms of the system and how we can solve for it. But
Yeah.
we're learning a whole different, like, I thought it was the house was built this way. And then
Yeah.
I find out the house is built this way. And I'm like, well, I
Nope,
wasn't.
and I'm not using the master's tools to take down the house. Okay, what are we doing? Yeah.
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 Yeah. I don't know if you read the article that Jamila Jamil wrote about how we let pedophiles create our beauty standards on her Substack. You guys should check it out. And so, for example, like we've now allowed pedophiles to create these beauty standards. We've been adhering to these beauty standards, and obviously, everyone who knows me and me, I'm a glam girly. I love beauty. Fine. Some more food for thought. There's this big counter movement that women are now going to be involved with, which is like, okay, well, we've obviously been lobbying for more female representation on screen. We know the data around that. The more female stories are told that are created by women for women, you just change people's understandings of their lives, right? Like, we know this. If you can see it, you can be it.
Yeah.
And so there's some data around how these pedophilic standards have played out on screen. So in Hollywood, for example, there were obviously women that have speaking roles are significantly younger than their male counterparts. So the majority of female characters that have speaking roles are in their 20s and 30s, 64%, whereas the majority of males are in their 30s and 40s, 62%. So we can see that as who is allowed to talk on camera. We're emphasizing that.
Mhm.
And the same thing with female teen characters, 13 to 20, and young adult characters. They're more likely to wear sexually revealing clothing and be partially naked compared to older women.
Yeah.
And data indicates that younger female characters are far more likely than their male counterparts to be shown in revealing attire, so 30% versus 7%, or with some nudity. And so those are all simple areas where we can just say,
Hey.
let's examine
Yeah.
how we are telling women and young women to relate to themselves through narrative.
Yeah. The speaking roles, the reason why we emphasize speaking roles in the data is like, is it a speaking role or is she just on screen, right? Because we were really, especially the Gina Davis Institute in the early stages of their data, they were really interested in that. And why they were interested in that was actually, if you track a speaking character, so are you a protagonist? Are you a main character, a minor character, a speaking character, right? So it would go like that. But as a speaking character for women, they were tracking as a woman speaks, is she on camera or does the camera pan away? Right? And so as women speak, it's more likely that the camera will pan away and you'll only hear her voice. You won't have to watch her speak, which we can connect that to all forms of like interrupting, right? Like all of this stuff.
Yep.
We don't like women talk. And then we get into the age stuff, which I think the data, and especially at USC, they're really focusing on age and this connection between, women being younger on screen, men had hit their prime, all of that. Like the data shows that. But what is the impact of that too, right? Like how does it make women not want to age and why, right? And it is that desirability towards being younger. But it also is because older women are free, right? And when we put older women characters on screen, they're free. They're highly sexualized, not highly in a bad way. They are allowed to be free and sexual, right? They are living lives that are not in the bounds of the family unit, so a man and children. And so there's something about those storylines that I think are threatening to a system that wants to make women smaller. But for us, the data around the naked bodies, y'all, 30% to 7%, that's the one connection for me, right?
Right. And as you say, this has implications beyond. So like with the stories that we let dominate, they create other massive implications. So that comes to funding, where 2% of venture capital goes to women. The number one vehicle to build generational wealth is predominantly built for white men. But as you say too, who are we allowing to speak? We allow women to speak in very specific ways in our culture. It is evidenced by podcasts, right? What are women allowed to speak about? Sex, TV, clothing. We don't actually celebrate women in business or academic context. There's a way that we allow women to speak. I feel that all the time just in my own life between the two parts of what I do, which is writing and speaking and DJing. Where am I really supported and where is it more uncomfortable for people to support me when I'm saying more opinionated things versus dancing behind a booth?
Girl, just look pretty and play that music.
Yeah, the dichotomy of that is very clear to me. And obviously, like, I love both parts of that in my world, but I do understand how the world responds to those different parts of me. And so
Yeah.
then let's go in further. So then you talk about research, healthcare, all these things where obviously like women's healthcare research deeply underfunded.
Mhm.
The idea that we've been gaslighting women for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden now we find out, PCOS, all these things for women that were never looked into that are
Yeah.
huge issues. I believe it's like 70% of women have
Yeah.
PCOS. I don't
Yeah.
even know exactly this.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, the data or the stat, but we've underfunded women's healthcare. We've underfunded the research because that is not where we're prioritizing. And
Yeah.
so it's a web of like all these things implicate the next thing and
Yeah.
diminish the quality of life for women.
Yeah. So I think, where do you go from there? First of all, I want to say the obsession with beauty and glam, when you are doing it, it seems like it's for beauty and glam's sake, right? And I think there are two separate
Yeah,
windows
let me
here.
explain. When I'm
Yeah.
beauty and glamming, it is not for men. It is
Yeah.
not for the male. Let me be very clear. That's actually such a good distinction
Yeah.
because it was like so funny. I had a boyfriend in my early 20s. I remember one day I was wearing this jumpsuit and he was like, "That's really ugly. Can you take that off?" And I said, "You think I get dressed for you? You think I give a fuck about what you think about what I'm wearing?" I was like, "Are you nuts?" Like, this is for me. This has
Yeah.
always been for me. Like,
Yeah.
my expression of my clothing and my glam is for me. I do not care if you like it or not. I do not care. Like, maybe I care about like if the gays like it, we do it for the gays. But
Yeah.
like other than that, I truly do not care. I think that's such a good distinction to make. The motivation behind it for me is self-expression, and it
Hmm.
is rooted in how beauty and how I see the world. It is
Yeah.
not rooted in a response from men. It is totally decentered from men, and that is a really good way for us to like if we love beauty and glam, like you don't have to
Hmm.
reject it. There's a way for it to still feel in alignment with it.
It's important for us to point out that you're rare, right? Like
Mhm.
that version of beauty um is not the norm in what we see, right? And
Mhm.
last year when we did the data about the cost of beauty, and we found that women spend on average 2 weeks of every year working on their appearance. Like, that's how much time. You could take a vacation somewhere fabulous, right? Or
You're
you
right.
could work. I mean, like, I love
Yeah.
my nose, but whatever.
I'm definitely spending 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. But like the difference here is how it feels on the inside of who you are getting ready for. And are you doing it as a way to conform? Are you doing it as a way to be accepted? You have a lot of privilege around pretty privilege and also body size privilege, right? That you're able to do these things and not worry about what you look like. So it's like layers on layers. But at the end of the day, what we learned from the Epstein files was that the dudes who were establishing these beauty standards are the same men who were trying to get with 12-year-old girls.
Yeah,
When I
exactly.
think about Pink, Victoria's Secret Pink, that ruled my life,
Yeah.
right? And as a girl whose
Mhm.
body was bigger, I couldn't fit into those clothes.
Yeah.
I wanted to be that little prepubescent thing so bad, right? I wanted to be something that I naturally wasn't.
Right.
There's this girl on TikTok right now. We're going to have to find her name, but she's like, "Is your armpit hair grown out yet? Have you learned to be comfortable in your," and that's an evolution that we all have. And I finally learned to be in my own body and what I like to wear and what my beauty means to me. But so many women are trapped in that gaze. And that
Mhm.
gaze is the thing that these men who are abusing women have established. That full
Yeah.
circle is a mind,
And Trump owns these pageants, these beauty
right?
pageants, and so we have to think about that, which is like never again should we even worry because the standard is created by predators. So it's like why would we ever want to adhere to that standard or care about that standard? Relinquish it, you do you, as we're moving into this weird like Ozempic era where like thin is
Mhm.
in again and it's a bit concerning.
Heroin chic is concerning. Yeah.
Deeply concerning. I know.
Low-rise themes are the
I'm like,
ultimate.
go back to like wherever you feel good is where you feel good. Like reject all the media beauty standard because it's really about your individual journey and where you feel good. And
Yeah.
if we've learned anything from what's happening is like, let's unlearn everything we know.
Yeah. Well, don't you think it's interesting too, Denise, that like the way that social progress happens, right? Like we push I mean, like let's just go back, like
Yeah.
maybe pre-COVID, not even that far, but
Yep.
like when Jamila Jamil was at her fucking heyday, right? And we were talking about all the body stuff and we were having it and justice felt like it was there and we were trans pride, like that was like not that long ago, right? And
Yeah.
this is how social movements happen is as soon as you get that progress, you have to expect the backlash. I don't think we were expecting this level of backlash, but know that we are only in this backlash because we got so far. We can get there again. It wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah.
And so what is it that will radicalize you, right? What is it that radicalizes somebody into being like, that's enough? Like, what is your lever? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
maybe radicalize is the wrong word because it's not, it's just like, where's your tolerance? You know?
These days it's choose your fighter. Like
Yeah.
there's so many things unraveling that we are learning about in real time that there's so many things to pick from in terms of what your genesis point can be to say, okay, this system doesn't work. And
Yeah.
everyone has a different input. But at this point I'm like, pick one.
Choose your fighter. Yeah. But I think that's really great too, because we were at a time, and I think that's why the social progress was easily so slipped back, was that everybody had to be the jack of everything. You had to be hyper woke. You had to say the right thing, right? Like we were having a war over the war woman while they're over here literally having a war on women, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, pick your lane. What are you dope at? How do we build coalitions around that? Like, what do you really care about? Dig all the way deep into that. Where does your personal become political? Right. And how do we move forward in that lane? And how then does change actually become sustaining change? I think is what we really need. I don't know how we got to that point, but
Well,
that's
it perfectly leads me into my next
okay.
question with you, which is you had talked about your new framework is see it, speak it, change it.
Yeah.
And it's a new method. Like these systems clearly need to die.
Yes.
And what comes next? And I think this is the big question. We're all sitting in this discomfort of understanding, okay, yeah, these things clearly didn't work. We have enough evidence now to know that things have to change. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, the hesitation is, well, how, right?
Mm,
What does that look like?
yeah.
And so for me, this is what this podcast is all about. It's what does this new world look like and how do we build something better in place of what's crumbling?
Because it's all too much.
I know. We started this really just being about taking back the word too much for women. And now I'm like, actually, take it back for everything.
For everybody.
Simpler times, please. I keep coming back to imagination as our most radical act right now. And I'm
Yes.
talking about imagination in dreaming, not imagination in my imagination can't even go where
Yeah.
these men have gone. I'm talking about imagining, like, and I heard this on a podcast where a woman was talking about her ancestral history. Her ancestors were slaves. And she had said, I think it was Brittany Packnett Cunningham on We Can Do Hard Things.
Okay.
And what I really liked about it was she said, my ancestors didn't just dream to have a nicer master. They dreamed of
Right.
a world in which I was free.
Yeah.
And that is what we all need to take away is this idea we need to dream as big as possible right now,
Yeah.
which is it may not be for us in our lifetime, but it might be for the next generation, the next generation. We should not ask for a modicum improvement upon a flawed system. We should
Mhm.
dream up the new system. And so
Yes.
that's really where I'm sitting is what is the world in which we are all free?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the world in which women are free is where we've gotten rid of objectification, where women are no longer bodies to be consumed. We're whole people, right? And our wholeness is valued and appreciated and honored. And just like we praise and honor men in our culture, which we do, right? Which we do. And So that's for me. That's the world I want to reimagine.
Mm.
And girl, I was super pregnant watching some movie. I don't even know the name of the movie, but in the movie, they got Prince Andrew to confess that he was involved with Epstein. And then in the next scene, the queen is like, all your titles are gone. And I was like, stop all the presses. Did that fucking happen? Right? And then I was like, that's so dope. How in our culture, we just elected a rapist. How did we get here? Right? Like that, how did we get here? And I
Yeah.
really believe that how we got here was that we as a society decided that women's bodies are disposable,
Yeah.
that they don't represent our humanity. They represent something to be consumed, something to sell. And that disconnect between our body and our brain, that these two things are connected, that's where we went wrong, right? And I really think that we can repair that. I really believe that.
We can repair that. I see it all the time. I have a wealth of evidence that the world can look different because I'm around all different types of amazing people who are embodying a new version of the new world. Like everyone I interview on this podcast, but even just like in my friend group, like I have heterosexual couples that are really conscious, that are showing us pioneering a different way of building a family.
Yeah.
They're not relying on the women to do all this unpaid labor.
Yeah.
They're building it together. In fact, in some ways, I would say that some of the couples I know, the men are doing more, you know? Like it's like so it exists. And that's sort of my point always is that
Yeah.
we don't have to look far because everything is around us. It all exists. We just have to implement it and follow it. Even talking about world without objectification, right? Like part of why like I love Japan, and this is not everyone's experience in Japan, so I don't want to speak for everybody, but like when I go to Japan, part of why I love Japan is because it's the only place I can walk around at all hours of the day and night and not be catcalled. It's one of the only places where I feel very free. And it's such an amazing experience as a woman to not have to look around me 24/7 and just walk, you know? Like that's it's like so simple. It's so simple.
It's that simple, right? That you can walk around in your big heels and those big heels aren't a signal to somebody, come fuck me.
Yeah.
That if I show a little bit of my body, it's an invitation to have sex with me, right? And that you think that I'm an object that you can occupy. Okay, so how do we get there? See it, speak it, change it. I also believe, so there's two big things I believe. One, that media impacts society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so changing media is a great way we can change society, and that you have to talk back to the screen, right? Like learn what the patterns are, and so you talk back to it. The second
And
thing,
put your dollars towards the content you want to see in the world.
vote with your remote and also talk back to it. Like, oh, there's little girls on screen half naked. I don't like that shit. Stop the one-to-one, right? Stop it just consuming you. Talk back to it. The second thing is that in order for anything to change, any cultural change, and this comes from critical race theory, right, is that you have to be doing both your inner work and your outer work, and that your inner work impacts your outer work, right? So the inner work is the decolonization of yourself, right? And there's so many layers of that. White supremacy, body size, age, heteronormativity, right? I was just teaching all about compulsory heterosexuality last night with my students. It was so fun. But that's the inner work. How do you undo this in yourself? And then that will impact how you move through the world, how you vote, how you, everything you do. Okay, so.
And the inner work is a hill I will die on because it's just like I can't even explain to people enough because it all affects how you move through space, how you handle your own agency, traumas. It is the most important, and it's never done, right? It's a lifetime of work.
But it's so fun. I mean, I think
It's
this
the
is
most
too,
important.
right?
It's the most important.
And when you're like, oh, you want me to do anti-racism work? Yeah, it's so fun. Yes, do it. Free yourself.
And for people that are afraid of it, my thing is when you do that work, you show up more and more in the way that you want to make the people that you love feel safe, seen, and heard around you. And even if you mess up, you can catch yourself more quickly. But there is a level of just more personal power because you're not sitting in fear because you haven't done enough of the work to know if you're going to do or say the wrong thing or come off in a way that you're not proud of or that doesn't feel in congruence with who
Yeah.
you believe you are. And it
Yeah.
takes time and it takes effort and it takes maintenance,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's awesome. And it's fun. So, what is the work that in this age of the Epstein files, I feel like we need to start calling it something else too. But we'll come to that. Maybe you have a good name for it because I feel like calling it the Epstein files doesn't say what it is.
The
And
last
it's
stand of patriarchy.
sure. The of children, I mean, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like the peak of the patriarchal iceberg in which we're okay with young girls being raped,
The
tortured.
normalization of
Yeah,
pedophilia.
there we go. Yeah. Okay. So my grandpa's brother. My family is I'm sixth generation, and my daughter's seventh generation. So I'm sixth generation LA, which is rare, right? LA is a implant city. So we're from here. So my family's old Hollywood. Okay. Worked in the industry. So my grandpa was a famous stuntman. His brother was going to be the next James Dean. His name's James Stacy. He tragically lost an arm and a leg in a motorcycle accident, which ended his career. Because of this, a lot of Hollywood people know about him, right? It's like this fabled story. They also know that he was a pedophile. Quick Google search. Homie's a pedophile. Members of my family, all of their friends. Like, homie was a serial pedophile. So, E True Hollywood Story did a whole thing on it. So, a couple summers ago, when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was coming out, people started calling me and members of my family like, oh my God, did you see James Stacy's in Quentin Tarantino's new movie? And we're all like, why? Like, why is anybody doing this, right? So I was in Mexico at the time. I get back like as soon as I land, I go see it. I was so not prepared, Denise, like especially as a film studies professor where Quentin Tarantino's problematic, but you got to give it up for his film language, for the way he pays homage, for the way he uses metaphor. Like, homie is so thoughtful about every single thing he does, right? So I was like, why? What would he put my uncle in this movie for? What's he using him for as a symbol for? Just this carefree dude who's in westerns and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, just there. No mention of the pedophilia in a movie that hypersexualizes young girls and makes them the Lolitas egging on older men who are becoming victims to their woeisms. Then I was like, wait, he's one of 3 pedophiles in this movie that we know of. So Roman Polanski's in the movie, James Stacy's in the movie, and so is Charles Manson. All 3 of them, pedophiles.
Yeah.
And there's no mention of that in the movie, right? And mind you, this was at like the peak of Me Too, where we're like talking about sexual abuse all over the place. So I see the movie, and because of my lens and because of my history of abuse and me knowing homie's a pedophile, I'm watching the movie with a different set of eyes, right? So when Pussycat has her lap, and the name Pussycat, a young girl, has her lap in Brad Pitt's lap and is trying to give him a blowjob, and she says, "You're just too old. That's why you won't do it." And he's like, "No, I'm just not going to go to jail for some poo-tang." So jail. Jail is the reason
Right.
jail,
Right.
not because that's wrong. And the whole movie, so what we talked a little bit earlier about the gays, right? And whose gays we're serving. So the whole movie, if you're interested in this, look up Laura Mulvey, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. She's the one who sort of coined the phrase the male gaze, right? So not gays like the good boys, but gaze, Gaze, how we're seeing. What movies do is they will show you the characters. The camera will be on the character, and then it'll cut to what the character's looking at. And so that puts you through their eyesight. You are now living vicariously through their eyes, right? So in this movie, we'll look at Brad Pitt, and then it'll cut to what he's looking at. And what he is looking at is girls, prancing across the street in little cutoff shorts and their boobs are going like this, right? And they're little girls and he's watching them. And then he sets his eyes on Pussycat. Then later we see Pussycat on a bench and she's in those super cute cutoff shorts and this macrame top, but her legs are wide open on a bus bench, right? So you see Brad Pitt, then you see him looking at her. Now we are consuming this little girl through his eyes. So we're being trained to view it through the sexualization of this young girl. Then she bends over to talk to him in his car. Now the shot is not from the mutual conversation. Now the shot goes to behind her. So you're seeing her bent over in the window of his car, and what we're staring at is her butt spilling out of these shorts, right? This is the way in which movies prime us to consume young girls' bodies. And then there's the George Staff character and all the Manson girls who are like pregnant and trying to get him to have sex with them. And he's like, no, don't, I can't, right? It's just like over and over in this movie. Everybody was complaining about the dirty Mexican language, the Jackie Chan stuff, Sharon Tate stuff. Like there were plenty of things people were complaining about this movie. Nobody was like loud and proud about there's pedophiles in this movie and it's training me. And in a movie that features pedophiles and does not mention them as such, it is making me, the viewer, consume and desire, like how my brain just like exploded, right? And I was like, okay, calm down. Because a lot of people will say that they watched that movie and it made them uncomfortable, right? So the fact that so many people didn't see it and this movie goes on to win awards and we're in the midst of Me Too, just like, it frustrated me. But for me,
That's an important distinction because it's a misalignment, right? In the
okay.
midst of the scandal of Me Too and
Yes.
holding this industry accountable, we are also then upholding a standard that directly violates the Me Too movement, right? And that's exactly where we see so much in our culture is these misaligned incentives. So the feedback on the America's Next Top Model documentary was Tyra's trying to expand beauty standards to be more wholesome while simultaneously upholding outdated beauty standards. So therefore, no movement or progress will be made because you have two opposing incentives clashing against each other, creating a culture of misalignment. Yeah. That's an important distinction to make, which is that during that time, we are not embodying and integrating Me Too. We are watching Me Too, and we are saying not again while giving awards to a movie that reinforces what was happening pre-Me Too.
Exactly. And what was the tagline of that movie? For people who love movies.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, damn, like maybe Tarantino's trying to say something about the underbelly of Hollywood and how we don't see, and then he was like, Harvey Weinstein got to do what he did because that's just the way that it was, right? And I was like, no, clearly this is part of this system and you know what you're doing, right? You don't include James Stacey in a movie and just have him there. You know what I'm saying? You could have picked any Hollywood actor. Why pick him? How do we then train ourselves to see it differently? So now fast forward, how many years it's been? Probably 5. I was just listening to Smartless the other day, and Margot Robbie's on there, right? She played Sharon Tate in the movie. And they were like, oh my God, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Oh, best movie ever. She's like, yeah, it was so great. Telling all these stories, talking about how wonderful Tarantino is. I'm like, yo, we are in the middle of Epstein now. And still, nobody, while you're making that movie, you don't think about it. When you're watching that movie, you don't, and so I'm really like, we have to see it. Us, the audience members, we have to be like, I don't want that, right? I'm not going to buy this. I'm not going to watch this. I'm not going to go to this. And then talk about it with each other. Help yourself. Help me help you. Undo, right? This normalization of the sexualization of young girls. 30% to 7%. When you see naked young girls on screen, be like, why? Why is she naked? What's she naked for? She's a little girl. Why doesn't she have any clothes on? Why is that okay? So that's first. See it. Start seeing it. Train yourself. Every time you see a little girl on screen and okay, let's talk about the little girlness of it all too. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. What age is little girl for you? Viewers listening too, right? Like what comes to mind? When you say little girl, right? Are you
I
picturing
mean, I don't think anyone should be doing anything till they're 30. I'm like, you should not be getting married till you're 30. I don't think you're a full person with a true sense of self until you're about 30. So yes, technically I think you can be an adult in your 20s and your late teens, but I think back, I was such a self-possessed, independent young woman with a myopic lens towards succeeding and smart
Yeah.
and capable, and I just am like, "Ugh, you knew nothing. You just knew nothing." And I think that's important to say because people would look back and probably disagree with me. I had really big jobs in my early 20s, but I look back and I don't think you have enough information or life experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're seeing a girl on screen, like what age is old enough for her to be naked, right? What age is old enough for us to watch girls have sex? Like, so
I don't even
that's,
know.
I don't know either, right? But all of it, this is the point in which we feel, obviously, remember the whole Megyn Kelly thing. So, like, we feel differently when we hear that a 5-year-old, somebody had sex with a 5-year-old, somebody had sex with an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18, like where does your threshold stop, right? And so for me personally, I know that even my own shame and reckoning with everything that happened to me is different when the teenage years than when I was younger. Like it feels different, it looks different. We have to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean it's okay, but it does look different. And we tell stories about it differently. That's why Pussycat isn't an 11-year-old. Pussycat's probably a 16-year-old, but still our threshold has to go lower, right? So that's the see it. Talk back to the screen. America invented teenagers, right? Like we
Yeah.
invented. So teenagers should not be sexualized on screen. We should not be visually consuming the objectification of young girls' bodies. And when that is being presented to us, see it, name it, right? Whoever you're watching it with. Or if you're not watching it with somebody, call somebody and be like, oh, did you see that? That's how we do the inner work. What is being revealed in these files, the stories that we're being told, what we've accepted as a culture, where our culture is. Do you think that's okay? Is that okay with you? And then you have to think about how did we get here? And one of the ways in which we got here is being fed images of old men with young girls
Yeah.
and the hypersexualization of young girls and the objectification of women, period. The gaze. How do we look at women? What do we value about women? What do we tell women is the most valuable thing about them? What they look like and their ability to land a man.
It's true. And the moment you decenter, you change
Yep.
what matters to you, society looks at you differently, right? Like they ask what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And, I always like feel like that's also the crazy thing, which is a lot of people are asking single women, like, why are you single? And it's like, why are you asking me?
Yeah.
Like something's wrong with me, something's deficient in me, when
Yeah.
maybe you need to be asking the men.
Yeah. What is the situation in which relationships aren't tenable for women who have decided to step out of patriarchy? My husband is a former NBA player. And so I used to joke with him when we first started dating, I will never be a basketball wife. I will never be a housewife. And he was like, yeah, I know that about you. We get married, and then he expects me to be a housewife. He thought when I said that I meant I will always work, not all the labor stuff, the weaponized incompetence. It's fascinating how our culture works, right? And so there's so many layers in which you can look into your own life and how is a system in which men are privileged over women and girls impacting your daily experience. But right now, we are faced with this peak, treacherous cliff of this revelation of how many of these girls were being so abused and that the most powerful men in our country were the ones doing it.
Yeah.
So how do we change our country? Right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with it. But
Yeah.
maybe
I mean,
that's the tipping point.
What I'm struggling with, and I'm not a parent, but I do think about how do you have this conversation with young women?
Okay.
How do we create channels of optimism and hope for them in something that can feel incredibly demoralizing and defeating to think,
Yeah.
oh, can I change anything if the most powerful people behave this way? And
Yeah.
I really do think it's being exposed so it doesn't happen again. And I'm really of the mindset that we have to face the ugly stuff to build the beautiful stuff. And we
Mm-hmm.
can only know joy if we know grief. All
Right.
those dichotomies are important. And so, as someone who's well versed in this, what would you suggest? What would you tell parents? How do we start to
Mhm.
navigate that conversation
Yeah.
and optimism for the future?
So I think that we talk to everyone, right? And so I think that impulse to be like, what am I going to tell my daughter? Right? I was watching a video by this black feminist, and she was saying that it's so interesting that white people feel like they don't have to have the talk with their kids. Oh, you're not having the talk with your kids? You're not telling them to not be the one who's shooting us? You're not, we're over here telling our kids to be careful, but you're not telling your kids that they're most likely to be the ones who are doing the damage. So how
Yeah.
you that right? So I think through that lens that we all have to be having these conversations, right? About what does it mean to be a human in our society? How are you dreaming in the same way that Ibram X. Kennedy was talking about, like, what does it mean to be in an anti-racist society? How do you dream into that? How do you visualize that? Back to your imagination,
Yeah.
right? So for yourself as a parent, what would it feel like to occupy a world in which you don't have to have that conversation with your daughter? That you're
Mm,
letting her go to sleepovers, that you're
yeah.
not worried about her with that crazy family member, right? Like that, if that world in which you felt as free as you do in Japan, you felt that way in New York, you felt that way in the streets of LA, you felt that way in the middle of Tennessee, like how would your life be different? And I think that dreaming has to be first. And then once you feel what that feels like, you communicate that to your kids. You let them be wild and free. You let them understand respect for people's bodies, that consent is a two-way street. And I think that that aspect of consent is also, what does that look like in lived experience? And this is where the media has a really prime role to model this for us over and over and over and over and over and over and over again too. Kathy Lee Bex, she works at Rise at Disney, but she used to be on that show. Oh, what's the name of that show? East Los High,
Oh,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
And she called herself the condom police because she came from public health. So she made sure that every single sex scene they had on East Los High, they would put a condom on the table, that you would see it. It's that type of thing. How
Well,
we
it's
model.
heated rivalry too, right? When you
Yeah.
watch heated rivalry, there's so much consent in those main characters' interactions, and it's sexy and it's fun and it's not doesn't seem like every time people talk about consent, they're like, oh, that seems like it's like messing with the flow of sex. And it's like, no, it can be a seamless part of how you build and communicate with a
Yeah.
partner. And you're right, it's the modeling. And that's what I keep coming back to, separate from imagination and
Yeah.
figuring out what are the frameworks and systems. How do we hold industries and people accountable? But
Yeah.
it's really how do we daily embody the world we want to see?
Yeah.
And we have this great opportunity just as human beings every day to
Yeah.
be incredibly loving, to hold people accountable when they do something that we don't agree with. And I did it the other day. Like I do it all. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm always holding people accountable. That's because I'm also holding myself accountable. Okay. But it doesn't have to be so intense. I'm usually like, can we not make a racist generalization?
Yeah.
Can we not? That feels a little bit anti-Semitic. Can we not like do that? I'm not trying to like point you out. I'm like in a
Yeah.
kind way suggesting that maybe you didn't
Yeah.
understand the magnitude of your words.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when I'm objectified. I just say, I don't really appreciate that. It doesn't have to be such a big thing. And I think sometimes people are so afraid to hold people accountable because they think they're going to have a reaction and they're going to get defensive. And sometimes they do. Those micro actions create macro impact.
Yep. So micro actions create macro impact. Preach, girl. That's the inner work, outer work, right?
Yeah.
That's the way in which you're changing your insides is going to change the way you function in the world, and that changes the world. The other thing I think is important. So then I'm going to grooming, right? So I think we need to better understand that and what that looks like and how to spot it and have training on it. I went to a boarding school that came out with all of the sexual abuse, which I thought was amazing that they were real about that and came out about it. But it's a boarding school. Where are the lines of grooming at a boarding school, right?
Yeah.
So, what does grooming look like in different contexts? And how do we spot it? How do we see it? And when we see it, what do we do about it? I think that's the
Yeah.
next piece, right? That brings us back to the Diddy of it all, the Epstein of it all. Like, when you know about it, what do you do about it? Is there whistleblowing for grooming? If we are building a world, what does this world look like? How would it look different? In other societies, what did they do? Like, what are we going to do to be like, no fucking more, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so there's the grooming of it all, and then there's the way that we're raising our girls of it all too.
And our boys. Yeah.
But for me, I think it's really important to tell your young girls about the Bechdel test. Do you know about the Bechdel test?
I know, but let's tell the audience.
Let's tell the audience about the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test is a measure of fiction that actually arrived from a comic book series by Alison Bechdel, and in it she came up with this rule that a work could be considered to be like feministly woke if it has more than one female character and they talk to each other about something other than a man. And bonus points if you actually know their names. Very simple. 2 women on screen talking to each other. You can pass the Bechdel test.
Like Nicole and I are right now passing the
we're
Bechdel
passing
test.
the Bechdel test. Okay, but they have to be talking to each other about something other than a man.
Yeah.
Right? Which is pointing out the way in which men, our bosses, our fathers, right? The relationships are so central to our lived experience, or centered that way in media. Okay, anyway, so hardly anything passes this. Even a movie like A Star is Born, the Lady Gaga one, does not pass the Bechdel test. Even though a girl, she has one conversation with another woman in that movie, and it's about Bradley Cooper, who even knows his real name.
Yeah.
Okay, so on and on and on. This is what we're trained with. So I challenge the girls in my classroom to pass the Bechdel test in their real life. I spent a year living with nuns. It was like the best year of my life. And we would have these incredible conversations. There were other women that lived in the house that weren't nuns, not just me. And we would have these incredible conversations, and our worlds were expanding, and what do we care about, and what are we going to do with our lives? And then I would go have lunch with my girls. I'd have brunch with my girls, and they'd be like, so I'm dating this guy. And I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? That's what we're going to spend the next hour talking about? Is some dude that's going to be irrelevant?
No, it's so funny. It's so funny because I do this with my friends. I go on walks and we talk for the most part, as this podcast definitely emulates. We're talking about a lot of ideas. We're talking about values, ideas, or very rarely talking about dating.
Yeah.
Comes up here and there. I was on a walk with my friend one time and she was like, so like, are you dating? And I was like, literally all I have to say is this. It's only going to matter when it matters. Like, may the best man win. I don't really care to talk about the couple dates I've been on. Because if it's not important, if they're not like, you know, they're not passing the litmus test, if they're falling off, like I'm not going to waste the energy talking about that because I really don't care. There will be someone that will be worth talking about. And when that happens, we will talk about it. I stopped letting that run or drive my life largely because it just doesn't feel as interesting.
That's what we are trained to believe is the most valuable thing about us.
Right. But because I've decentered men from my life, I'm reading a book a week. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm having these beautiful, magical conversations. I'm in nature. I'm meeting interesting people. I'm having the time of my fucking life. And I'm just like, I'm like, there's all these magical things to discover in life.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about how that works though too, right? So how do you get to a point where you decenter it? I think part of it is not living for the male gaze. So we talked about that. There's, oh my God, another Margot Robbie example. What's that character she plays where she's Joker's girl?
Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn, right? Okay, so if you see, there's a meme of this. You could like put it in your stories or whatever, right? But it's Harley Quinn side by side in the Joker movies and then in Birds of Prey. Side by side. It shows you the difference between dressing for the male gaze or being for the male gaze and her just being her, right? And being still fabulous and wonderful. That, I think, is something really important to let young girls be free of that, of what they look like is not the most important thing about them, right? To express themselves and their fashion and their style and their beauty in whatever way feels great to them, but also to decenter conversations. What are you teaching your girls to talk about? I think
Yeah.
there's definitely something to that. Um,
And purpose. I think that when you find a level of purpose, whatever your zone of genius, unique gift, contribution to give to the world is, that does not have to be your job, but every single person has a unique contribution. When you find that, you fall in love. You feel it
yeah,
fills you up to a
yeah,
degree that you are less concerned about the male gaze. Obviously, this is a very heterosexual conversation. So,
right.
but like for me, that was such a big thing was that the moment I started filling myself up with what lit me up, I cared less and less about external validation. I cared
Yeah,
less and less about how that mattered in my life because I felt full. I felt
yeah,
full. Also, it's directly proportional to that. Finding that purpose or the thing that lit me up vastly contributed to having a greater sense of self worth,
yes, yeah,
which
yeah,
also changes your relationship to the male gaze.
yeah, for sure. And the way that you interact with men and what you'll accept, which I think leads us back to grooming also, right? Like I feel like what is it about a certain type of male attention that resonates,
Yeah.
right? So we kind of started in this place too of the complicity, right?
Mhm.
Why do we live in a culture where this is happening? Why do we live in a culture where women are Me Too'd? Why do we live in a culture where you're able to do this to young girls? And it's all part of the system. So when we talk about representation on screen, the kind of quippy thing I always say is like, cool, there were 7 more Latinas on screen this year, but if they're still all drug dealers, wives, and maids, have you actually advanced representation,
Yeah.
right? Representation is not just about bodies on screen, it's about the patterns of what you see these bodies doing, whose bodies are next to each other, what they're wearing, the patterns of the characters. When you have that pattern repeated over and over again, that 30% of the little girls
Yep.
being partially naked, that's a pattern, right? And so when we identify those patterns and we see how they're impacting society, we did this study with Amazon Films and we wanted to look directly at relationships and what are the patterns in relationships. And one of the things that we found is that men are more likely to be engaging in behaviors that will cause the demise of that relationship, while women are more likely to be engaged in behaviors that are trying to repair the relationship. All of these things lead to the idea that women's ultimate goal, what you need to be doing as a woman, is get in a relationship with a man. And that is the ultimate thing that you can do. To the point that even when we have movies like Hidden Figures coming out, which the whole point of that movie was like, there are women in science who are
Yeah.
hidden. We need to glorify them for the amazing scientific discoveries they've done, right? So you're in that movie, she's at the chalkboard, she's doing the formulas. She solves the problem. Her and the made up character, Kevin Costner, are like, woo, we solved the problem, right? Now she's headed home. And you're, as an audience member, you're like, yes, we're going to get to celebrate with her and her beautiful family. This is so amazing. She walks in the door. There's candles. She's at the table. And now homie is proposing to her. And I'm sobbing because it's Hollywood and they're great at that. I did not get to celebrate her solving the problem, which is the whole point of why she's a hidden figure. Now you got me celebrating that some rando dude wants to marry her. As if that is the peak, right? Denise, I died. I did.
Yeah. No, it's like, listen, like we obviously
I didn't even realize it though, right? Like,
we
see it.
normalize
Yes.
and value these are celebrations. It's a
Mm-hmm.
celebration to get married, it's a celebration to have a kid. And we're not talking about the other side of that, which a lot of people experience a lot of identity loss when they have a
Yeah.
child. We're not showcasing
Yeah.
that story. We're not showcasing a lot of other parts of it. But it is challenging because I was actually just talking about this because every single person feels this way. We've done an episode on the single tax. We know about the single tax.
And
But
single.
like the single tax, but the amount of money single people are spending to celebrate people's weddings, baby showers, bridal showers. And there is no tradition in our culture to celebrate single people
Mm-mm.
or deep personal professional fulfillment.
Right.
And it's skewed towards a heteronormative narrative in a patriarchal white supremacist culture. This is the opportunity we have right now is to expand the story, to expand the container, to say actually what are we building that
Yeah.
does allow people to be fully seen, because not everyone wants to get married. Not everyone wants to have kids. So what are the rituals and celebrations we can create so people don't have to feel like they don't fit in? This is the opportunity we're looking at, is where this thing is burning down and we get to decide what are we
Yeah.
putting forth as a culture that is more holistic.
Yeah. And please do it. I think another thing that's really important is that we continue to track the data. We're in a system now that's really taking away a lot of the studies that are done every year. So this is my nerdy plug too. We've stopped tracking the nudity of young girls. So that data that I gave you was from 2018. USC
Right.
Edinburgh doing it. They've stopped tracking that. Nobody's tracking it. How are we able to measure a change in culture unless we're measuring it, right? And so, someone out there, give somebody a bunch of money to keep tracking things that you think are important, that you want to change in culture, so that we can monitor it. But how does it all connect, Denise? It's all connected.
No, it's all connected. It's the web. It's, you look at one thing, you're looking at everything.
Yeah.
Right now, the imagination is important because
Yeah.
we are going to have to build stuff back. We're going to have to shift things, and we get to decide how we want to do it. And
Mhm.
so when we examine these systems, as uncomfortable as this moment is,
Yeah.
we get to say, this doesn't work for this reason and this affects this. As you said,
Yeah.
when we're looking at women in entertainment, we're also looking at how women are under researched and underfunded in healthcare, a huge
Mhm.
thing that we need to be paying more attention to. And
Mhm.
same thing with women in STEM, the resources or the stories we tell. How do we, and in this exact moment, say enough is enough? We're shifting it. And women are 51% of the population. We are
Yeah.
more college educated than men in America. And so even though we still earn less on the dollar, we have an immense amount of brain power and people power
Consumer power.
to
Mm-hmm.
build the world we want to see.
Yeah. So the thing that we haven't touched on is the world that we are living in exists because of who the people are in power, right? And we can define power in a multitude of ways, but what we've seen is every social institution is represented in the Epstein files. Every person of power in every one of our social institutions. So if you think like education, medical, media, right?
Yeah,
The
politics,
economy,
yeah.
politics, they're all represented there. So that means all of the levers of how our society functions is run by men who think it's okay to have sex with 12-year-olds and to abuse them, torture them, perhaps murder them. We're uncovering more and more every day. But this levity of the way in which they talked about the bodies of actual people, this, like that, we have to get back to that. We are not just bodies, we are people. So what does that mean when your society is run by men who think that's okay? And all of the dominoes there, right? So when we are imagining this world, who's in power? Who do you see? What kind of leader do you want? What kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of leader do you want to raise? What kind of leader do you want to auntie to? Like,
Yeah.
who are you impacting?
Yeah.
You know? That, and that's kind of a lane that I'm coming back to. I got a lot of that as a teacher, as a professor, but now I'm working with Women Connect for Good, and they're doing a program called Connect for Impact. And so it's a program for 16 to 20-year-old girls as this sort of like impact leadership training, right? Like, if
Amazing.
who are we passing the baton to? Who is going to occupy this world that we envision? And if it's so messy now, who are we bringing up? I think
Who are we
that's
platforming? Who are we supporting? Who are we giving our time and resources to? How are we showing up for others in our community? I mean, that's a big one. A lot of individualism here in the US that is expiring. Like, even if you don't gain anything from something, if it helps other people, do it. Really think about, who are you platforming? Who are you championing? How are you in your small corner of the world? You have power and you
yeah,
have choice. And with this podcast, obviously, it's a gift and an honor to platform people like you, to give voices to people that are doing beautiful work, and everyone has a footprint they can create. I truly do think in the next 5 years, if we take this moment seriously, there can be something really awesome that comes out of this, and we
yeah,
can look back and say, wow, look what we did.
yeah, yeah. So stop consuming little girls and stop accepting people who do. And then
TLDR. TLDR. Thank you so much for taking the time to give us your brain share, your expertise. I so appreciate it. I know you and I have been wanting to do an episode together for a long time. So thank you for finally making it happen.
Thanks for bringing me on. You're the best.
Okay. And will you tell everyone where they can find you?
You can find me at Hey Dr. Nicole, Hey DrNicole, everywhere. Look forward to connecting with you and sharing more stories together.
Me too. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Bulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you.